Once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. I once dated this person, but you see, I don't like to use the word dating because I feel like sometimes we confuse dating with prostitution today because it seems as though we won't even consider a person a date unless that person we actually get together with. So, even prostitution, what do I mean by that? I mean, very simple, exchanging sexual favors for money. That's my definition of prostitution. And sometimes women get tricked into these types of relationships thinking, oh, I'm a sugar baby, or oh, my boyfriend is providing for me. But you see, even the sugar dating culture is very narrow because that specifically is an art form, and unless someone is married, it's not legal, okay? It's not official. In the Bible, sex outside of marriage is the greatest sin. Now, in the Bible, the love of money uh is the root of many types of evil. So when a woman is given no presence in her childhood, presence of a father figure especially, and the female role models in her life also are very emotionally absent, even if they are physically there to make the child survive, the child can grow up thinking that she or he is something someone else pays for, and that's about it. So they do not feel real, they do not feel like they exist, they do not feel belonged and significant unless in their adult life they also get favors for their service. I I once dated a guy who was more than 40 years old at the time, and I was 21 years old when I started seeing him. He had been with over, if I remember correctly, 500 women, if not, if he wasn't in the four digits, but he was definitely over 500 women. And once he told me how one of his exes sent him a text saying she is about to end her own life and sent my date, so my ex, a certain amount of money that she accumulated over the years. So basically, her life savings. And this man told this story with such emotional outburst that I was surprised to even hear him say what he was saying because apparently he was more impressed himself than the woman who basically gave her life up for him. It is a bit oppositional to think that a person's net worth is defined by the amount that they have as life savings or the amount that they earn on a yearly basis. However, I only think this is oppositional to intrinsic self-worth because a person can lead a good life without depending on money to such a degree that they love money. Now, even a hint of excitement in my ex's voice led me to believe that he loved money more than he loved his ex, which I would not be surprised to know because, I mean, once a person has been with more than 500 people, which I know may be uncommon because he's in the special position of being a celebrity himself. His job also involves sexual favors. A person cannot really get attached. I personally believe that once a person has above 5 as their body count, it's kind of over for them in a way because uh, I once heard Breeny Lee describe how soul ties work and how attachment works, and breakups are like the death of a loved one because let's face it, the people we are sexually intimate with, we expect to have children with them because that is our biology. Even men who can get really avoidant or really detached, their body, their physiology will subconsciously expect at one point or another for every single woman that he sleeps with to carry his offspring. The healthier he is, that is. And that is because even if he eventually abandons that woman, even if he leaves that woman, I interviewed men and I got replies such as, well, she left me, so she will have to take care of the child. But the thing is, men can be so selfish that they completely ignore a woman's desire to be with that man if they have like one reason to reject that woman. So men have such high standards sometimes they can exploit and use women, even though there are good men out there, and then use those women as the excuse of what did them wrong when really they just relieved a trauma through those women. Okay, so that aside, okay, I have had psychic experience with other people I dated, and this man in particular was very, like, how can I say, spiritually aware. So he was he has seen a lot of things. Okay, he has been into drugs. He has been uh to shamans and all these things. So he was not unaware and unconscious, but people who come from a good background, for example, a Christian household, and they are not exposed to worldly experience the same way. Once they see a woman they fall in love with, me in my case, they lead that woman to believe that she has such power that even the woman does not recognize in her past, and now she doesn't know what to do because it is the first time for her to ever be given such power. Power is not dangerous. What makes power dangerous is a lack of control over it and lack of awareness about how to utilize it in a way where both the person with the power and the people influence feel better as a result. When all you see growing up is abuse and trauma and disrespect, basically, the first time that you're respected in your life, you almost cannot believe how much respect and favors you are given. And so this is what happened with my newest ex, and one of the things about him was that he had been in relationships in the past, but I suppose that is why he paid me the slightest disrespect. Because as Brinley explained once, soul ties and attachments of lovers work like two papers sticking together with glue. Like you stick two papers together with glue, and then once you break up, you separate those papers by force because the glue has already just fastened and fixed the two papers together. So now the two are one unit, right? You cannot separate them unless by force. But once you do separate them, what ends up happening is the two papers will have patches of tears from the other paper, and those tears will be missing from that paper, and the opposite will be true with the other paper. So you will have torn two torn papers, incomplete, mixed energies, and not beautiful. Okay, not beautiful at all. So what many people about hookup culture seem to want to put on the forefront of their mind is how freeing hookup culture can be because of the sexual revolution, as opposed to religions opposing beliefs about sexuality, uh, or favor of modesty, for example. What many people do not realize about hookup culture is that every time you break up with every person you have slept with, because sooner or later, statistically, it is shown that the more people you have slept with, the more likely you are to repeat the same patterns of relationships in your future relationships. So the more people you slept with, the more likely you are sleep with the same amount of people instead of committing to one partner and being in a romantic relationship. So once you sleep with that many people and you keep sleeping with them, inevitably you have to break up with every person who is in your past and who is not currently with you. And that is a breakup, that is an ending, a death for you. Now, an upside of this is people are learning how endings are not failures necessarily, but this comes at a cost. It comes at the cost of monogamy essentially dissipating and disappearing and becoming conditional instead of unconditional, and the base of unconditional love, because the latter just does not exist. Okay. But you see, I also come from a background which made me dislike men extremely, and so I am prone to exchanging favors myself. I'm prone to initiate transactional relationships as opposed to just trusting community and then allowing a person to come into my life and then letting them just, be his masculine self. Unfortunately, that's my my problem. So psychic experience that happened with my most recent ex is that there are multiple. The first one, I already talked about a few in another video, but for this one, I am talking about three in particular. The first one is when he texted me how he started a business of writing, so becoming an author, and how he just hired someone to do his work for him. And it's like the week before or the month before, I had initiated the same thing in my own life. So, for example, by the time that he had his written work typed in, I had already started doing my work because I also am an author, so I need to type work in. And and it was a miraculous experience for me because one day I remember I woke up and I text in a group message, a group um, that I in the group chat that I want to find someone who is willing to learn English, improve their English, so on and so forth. And this was a language exchange group chat on Messenger, so kind of an unlikely platform. But I reached out of impulse because I felt the light. I felt like I needed to do it. I felt inspired. I felt like God was calling me. So I did it. I trusted the process. And then two people replied. The first person was a woman who was a psychology major. And when I reached out to her in private, I immediately asked, I hope you like psychology. And then she responded, I am a psychology major. And I was blown because this was like a perfect match. She typed in a lot of my work. And then later, my ex texted me how he had his work typed in by another person as well. Now, going back to the group chat situation, another person also reached out to me. He was a artificial intelligence major, so he also was living in the same place. So we had physical proximity and we met up, and I realized through him that artificial intelligence can scan written notes and digitalize them. So that was a plus too. Now, another psychic experience with my ex was when I was really at a low stage in my life because my grandmother had just passed, and my mother was suffering because of it. My mother has always been extremely attached to my grandmother, and so it 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 wore on her, but even she wore on herself even more. Like, it's hard to explain, but the attachment to mother is kind of also self-inducive. I remember my grandmother having told everybody before she passed that she doesn't want anyone to wear black because she had passed. And so please just wear your colors, you know. And my mother is a person who dresses like flamboyant. So she wears colors very vibrant like all the time normally. And she almost dresses like a clown. But once my grandmother passed, all of a sudden she started wearing black like this. And it's, you know, mourning is a self-serving act, but she was just in a low point, and this was also a breaking point for a lot of other people outside of our family and outside of this country, because it was like a worldly boiling point, if you know what I mean. This was in a few years ago, and And for example, in our street, a person has just stabbed another person with 50 knife thrusts. And I remember I had fought my mother at 17, so almost a decade ago, because she basically forced me to open the door on him or on her when when she had been screaming in front of my door for hours on end, like literally screaming from the bottom of her lungs. And my father wasn't at home, so he had no idea. Still, he does not, because I respect my parents and I don't tell them these things. But I'm telling you, so now you know. Once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. Uh, and so eventually, to stop the screaming as an underage child, I decided to open the door and threaten my own mother to stop. And then immediately she replied, like, "What? Are you going to murder me?" And I was like, obviously, I was not going to say no, because like that would have, like, literally, you know what I mean? Like, dissolved the defense that I was initiating. So I did not say no, but I didn't say silent either, although I should have, because I'm a voiceless, powerless person, as my mother raised me. I have no voice. I am powerless. I am a victim. That's how I have been raised. But because I have a voice, I said yes. So ever since that time, I appear to my mother as the realization of a murderer. And by the way, right before my grandfather passed, she told me why she puts diapers on my grandfather. Um, it was because if she didn't, it had been a murder. Okay, so that was her logic. And so that's what she did. And fast forward a few years, when my mother was also mourning my grandmother. um my mother is sitting in the garden and she's talking to my father in this low tone, but my selective hearing is fine-tuned to it, and I pass this door and I don't hear any of the conversation except that part when she says she's going to kill me. So now I am the definition of a scapegoat in the family, I guess, especially among me and my two parents, even though I still have no voice to express what I feel or what I think about their behavior. And I only have this platform to actually describe what actually happened. But even now, I'm scared to admit how I feel about that. So needless to say, I am avoidant towards my mother, as I have always been, since the age of like 8, when she started cheating on my father in a row for 4 times. They're still married, by the way, but I think it's because I was such a dainty, sweet, and beautiful child to my father that she eventually kept being married to my mother, that is. And I truly believe I was a good child. But my mother is really pessimistic and she never, ever, 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 ever verbally appreciated me for what I did, as much as she betrayed me and belittled me and just berated me and, yeah, condemned me. So I felt desecrated all my life. But that's not the point of this video. My second psychic experience was around the time that my mother called me a murderer, even though the incident happened more than 5 years ago. Because my mother holds onto grudges like crazy. And so I was basically reportedly underweight, as my mother later liked to refer to me as, because I was walking 10,000 steps every day. I was eating extremely healthy and extremely diverse. It was unlikely in this world, okay? Health is no measure of success in a profoundly unhealthy society. However, I was healthy. And little did my ex know, because he had not seen me for years at the time, I was as skinny as I had ever been. Now, the reason I like to emphasize I was skinny is because we usually look at skinny people as healthy, but I want to point attention to the fact that not every skinny person is healthy. I was the type of skinny who was healthy, even though my mother assumed that I was skinny because I simply had not eaten. But that was not the truth. I was doing everything in my power to achieve the weight and the body shape that I was aiming for. And once I achieved it, my mother thought my cup was full. But energetically, I felt it was half full. And when that's the case, when a person who wants to exploit you comes and drains the rest of their energy out, what ends up happening is you stop having confidence in believing in yourself. Anyway, that was the short, immediate, direct condition for me to text my ex at the time that I was staying home and suffering in silence, basically. He was the only person to hear me out. He was hovering around the the area as he always was, and this time I really felt like I needed to go, but I also felt ready to go because I was, first of all, physically healthy, okay? I was mentally clear. I was emotionally mature. I was also like feeling like having fun, even though like despite of everything I had been through. It all felt like something had to give. And so my ex gave because for like the 50th time he promised to come, and then he literally sent his location in real time, and then he showed how he passed my home but never actually got here. So we never met, but he kept texting me afterwards because he really had been in love the first time we met. So I kept texting him as well because I had no other outlet. And then what happened is I was packing up all my stuff like people in this country usually do because they live on the edge all the time. So I was picking up all my stuff. I only had one vehicle, which was human driven, like it was a bicycle. I had to actually, you know, push it myself with my own body to move it. Bicycle doesn't have an engine, so it's not comfortable to use that bicycle. And so that was the only time when my ex texted have some class, because right before I had texted him, I'm done, I'm ready to leave, I am not the source of this, fill in the blank. I am not the source of this abuse, I am not the source of this negativity, I am not, fill in the blank, whatever you want to think in there. But he, my ex texted me, have some class while she leaves. And I was like, you see, from the money you sent me, I literally had bought a book on etiquette. And by the way, he still is not aware at this moment. I literally had purchased a book from the money he sent me on etiquette because I had grown up without being taught how to have class. This is also why I do not respect my mother whatsoever. She has been the definition of no class. Classless, that is. I have seen her do things and say things that would disgust the most composed person on the planet. I would never, ever regret leaving her and not giving anything back to her simply because she is the most disgusting person I have ever seen. The most disgusting person by the way she carried herself all my life. So, I think she did most of the things that a person who does not respect themselves would do. So, if you are my mother and you are hearing this, hopefully I'm not around anymore. If I am, feel free to end my life because right now I am not afraid to leave this earth. Because you have the audacity to raise me to believe that I am against you, then why why won't you end my life, you know? So I never opted into existence. I never chose to be born, and yet you treated me like this scapegoat on my life. So I have a third psychic experience with my ex, and it was when I was just returning from the capital. I was feeling in a good mood because I had just talked to someone on the train, and unlike ever we had a conversation because in this country people do not have conversations, they do not trust strangers, they are not having fun, they are out to survive. Even on the train, even at work, they are not here to thrive. So I'm having this conversation about how grateful we are that the leaves are green outside the train, and I return home. By the way, the conversation had been about how I make money personally because I started having a conversation with father, and it kind of went like this. I started the conversation myself. He was sitting with his daughter, and somehow we got into how we can make money. Okay, because that's an important matter. And I told him nowadays you can make money doing anything, and he was present with me. I told him how I pointed out he must have been a runner because I had been a runner myself. I had run for the half marathon 4 times. So I told him I recognized runners from miles away. And then he got the message, got the clue, and he basically celebrated my presence in return. And I told him also how I had a father who had been smart because he chose education over just having a job. So I went home and my ex was still texting me, and it was about his experience with an eclipse, I guess. And he told me what it meant, and it meant changes. But since I am from this country, I live on the edge all the time, so I felt like I am used to feeling like my life is about to end almost every second day. But despite this, I felt that moon eclipse, if I remember correctly, with full force. Like I literally felt like it is a turning point for me because the eclipse was over an island where I wanted to live with my ex, and now he's there living with his girlfriend because I told him that if he breaks up with her, I will break up with him. So now he's living on the island with my uh, with her girlfriend, with his girlfriend, and the eclipse was above the island. And I think it was during that time that my life completely shifted from maybe you can live there with him to you can hardly live there with him anymore because, well, I just didn't let my ex experience the consequences of his actions, giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I kept texting him unconditionally, even if I messed him up, and I reportedly with him and him over because I did not give myself up freely anymore physically. So we would have had to lose all his dignity and bang the door down uh, for the first time to see me again. But I didn't let him do it, partly because my father was already continuously banging my door down because I had been living in my mother's apartment. And so, since my mother is my father's wife, he assumes that I am also property that belongs to him because I live in a place which is his property, which is not directly his property, but because his wife is his property, everything his wife owns is his as well, obviously. So my father to this day feels entitled to stay present in my life and basically disturb me and be redundant with me and sometimes verbally and physically abuse me to this day, even though clearly I have no other option. And even though maybe he has no other option to feel powerful either. But I mean, the fact that he's a doctor helps because sometimes he gives me medicine when I am at such a low point in my life that I want to die and catch infections because things happen to my body that are not normal, and my immune system is extremely weak because of him and his society. So basically, abusing and punishing people for being themselves unconditionally, especially women. I want to talk about a different topic all of a sudden because I remember how important it is to talk about denying power. So, once we deny, for example, people about our system or society, we eventually we not only do not get rid of them and their power, but we invite them to only have to focus on that. They are now in a powerless position, and so they will start to manipulate. The reason I like to talk about witchcraft is because witchcraft has once been frowned upon to such a degree that tens of thousands of women had been burnt alive not a long time ago in history. And because of that, women are aware of that today. even if they do not talk about it. And women now embody the wounded feminine, and this also initiates the wounded masculine to exist, by the way. And when I say women embody the wounded feminine, I mean they gain weight, they manipulate even harder than they ever used to, and even women who are good intentioned or well intentioned, and with a pure heart, even those women are basically forced to take on energy that just does not belong to them. So, for example, even the healthiest woman in a toxic place will gain weight. And you see, never blamed my ex for giving me such power that I could not possibly know how to handle. But rather, if I had to blame anything, it would be blaming society because of how much powerlessness it forced upon me. And it's such an euphemism to say society because obviously I was raised by my parents, meaning I was forced to live in close proximity to them, to associate with them eventually. I don't mean raised in a way where I was taught things. No, I was not taught things. I was taught what to fear about them. And that's what I mean by being raised. But um, yeah, being given physical resources as well, obviously, because I'm still here. But besides that, no emotional support whatsoever. So I was raised by my parents, and the first, the closest caregivers to the person who is raised, they will be most influential to that person's life, even if they have influence from external sources. And that is what happened to me because Teals 1 raised me with spiritual advice as opposed to my mother, whom I never trusted since the age of 8. And I started thinking realistically. I started seeing the truth more. I started thinking more objectively. I became so self aware that at age 17 or before, I filled out a test online questioning how self aware I was, and I got 100%. So I was fully self aware at that age, although I'm not sure how the test worked. But from that point on, I was confident in my ability to admit to my mistakes and see my flaws, as well as my positive sides. And so I had always tried to be as positive as much as possible, even though I had grown up in negativity, for favor of seeing the full truth. And when I met my now most recent ex, I think what I liked about him the most was that he had been extremely aware by means of how the feminine and the masculine can work together, because he seemed integrated enough for him to understand even his own mother, why he had been anxious towards him. And my ex also seemed inspired by me because not only did he see a new version of himself by meeting me, because he felt more masculine around me, because I was especially at a vulnerable point in my life when I met him for the first time. I was beautiful. I had gorgeous hair. I had a beautiful dress. I had eyelashes, and I was extremely healthy. I was probably the healthiest I had ever been. I also had some survival wealth that sustained me. I had my family without actively bombarding me about how bad I was and what I had done wrong. So I was in a peaceful place. I was freshly out of my mother's apartment and then I met my ex, and so I think I even felt comfortable around him. But this wasn't the type of love that makes your stomach lift and just turn. It wasn't the type of love that gives you the you know the shivers. It was the type of love that fills you with peace, knowing you belong and you have a place on this earth. And this feeling, for the first time in my life, felt was mutual, and he felt the same, I'm sure. And my ex was good also because he had been close to nature all his life, so he was aware for that reason as well. One thing I never really understood about my ex is why nature versus nurture had to be a competition. Like for me, to me, nature and nurture are basically the same. Because, for example, if you want to survive this world that has been built by men for men, if you want to have some relief, you go into nature. You go in nature and you have the relief. There is clean air, birds chirping, maybe you can even camp in nature and then be away from society. But that is the epitome of relief I know of, and that is nurture itself, in my opinion. Whereas if you get back to real life, right? You get nurtured by means of food, all the physical resources you have ever been given, maybe not your own produce, maybe not food you have grown or fed or raised, but definitely something full of life in one way or another. So that's nurture as well. If staying in the real life place, then I once heard a quote saying, nature is everything physical. Nature is everything in the physical world. So, for example, if I was to define nature, I would say a house is nature, a rocket is nature, a ship is nature, the Mars is nature, right? Because it belongs to the physical dimension. So, with that in mind, everything that you see is nature. However, when you go into nature, as we know, like for example, you go to the woods, that's nature, clearly, right? You wouldn't say that is not nature or nurture, but that is obviously nature in the first place. Like that will never be questioned because that is where the most green is. So that's why I don't understand the fight between nature and nurture. I don't understand men respecting their mothers so much that they ignore how disrespectful their mothers have been to them all their life. Even if those mothers raised their sons alone, but especially then, because, like, first of all, a mother has to respect herself enough to choose a partner who stays around raising the child. I'm not talking about instances when the father suddenly accidentally passes away. I'm talking about instances when the mother slept with a man as fast as I had slept with my ex. Okay, ex aside, the fight between nature and nurture creates tension between men and women as well, because as someone with such self awareness and knowledge about the universe, I had come to realize that if this man, like if my ex does not support me physically, then nobody will. So maybe I have the option to be homeless in his place, like around where he lives. So then he comes to my rescue. But to tell you the truth, I don't think my body's capable of doing that anymore because I'm not as healthy. Because something happened to my body that is simply irreversible, and I am regretful of that. But maybe if I want to pass, eventually I will end up there. But I still have some belongings I want to let go of, such as mental baggage, which I'm now sharing, by the way. So my ex's self-awareness and just general character and charisma had mesmerized me as well. It was incredible because I had never met anyone like that who had been that impressed by me and that inspired by me at the same time. I had never felt like a woman to such a degree ever, and I probably never will either, unless I belong to a community, but maybe that is for another lifetime. Who knows?